Hey language learners, it's your trusted teacher Izzy from English with Izzy. Welcome back to another exciting lesson right here on my channel. Today we're going to dive into the world of B2 phrasal verbs, more specifically 20 of the most common phrasal verbs that come up in the B2 First Cambridge English exam. Now, why are phrasal verbs a big deal? Well, they're like puzzle pieces that create natural and fluent conversations. Whether you're chatting with friends, expressing opinions, or telling stories, mastering these phrasal verbs takes your English to a whole new level. Not to mention, they are fundamental for any B2 level student. But phrasal verbs are usually quite problematic for students because they're very common in English, but not very common or sometimes completely don't exist in other languages. So memorizing them can really be a challenge. We're going to explore essential phrasal verbs like to put off, figure out, look forward to, and many more with definitions, examples, whether you should use the infinitive, the gerund, whether you can separate them or whether you have to keep them together. So by the end, you will have no doubts about how to use them. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our engaging language lessons. We're going to master these phrasal verbs and watch your English fluency soar. Okay, now enough chit chat, let's jump right into the action. All right, the first of 20 phrasal verbs we're going to look at today is to bring up. Now, bring up has a couple of different meanings. It can be to mention or discuss a topic, often from the past, but it also means to look after a child as they're growing up. The phrasal verb to bring up when we're talking about mentioning a topic is a phrasal verb that we can separate. So you can say she brought up the topic or she brought the topic up. So bring and up we can separate and put the object in the middle. Here are some examples. My friend brought up her childhood memories during the family dinner. I could also say she brought them up or she brought her childhood memories up as a separated phrasal verb during the dinner. My students, for example, in our conversation classes, they often bring up topics and events from their lives in class, and it really gives us a chance to get to know each other. My mum is quite a private person, so she would never bring up embarrassing moments of mine. However, my dad, on the other hand, is an open book and shares all my stories with the world, so he would definitely bring embarrassing moments up in front of his friends. But when we're using this phrasal verb with its second meaning, to grow up in a place or for somebody to look after you like your parents, then we generally keep it together. For example, I was brought up in England. My mum was brought up in Turkey in the passive voice. If you are the parent, then we use this phrasal verb in the active voice. I brought my daughter up, or my mum brought me up in England. So when we use it in the active voice, normally we separate it. She brought me up or she brought up her children. When we're talking about our personal experience, we normally use it in the passive voice and keep it together. I was brought up in whichever city, whichever country. All right, the second phrasal verb we're going to look at is to put up with. You can put up with someone, you can put up with something, and it essentially means to tolerate or to endure something that's not very great or that's unpleasant. For example, sometimes I have to put up with my noisy neighbor. He plays really loud music. It's something I have to tolerate and I don't really enjoy it. So I put up with it or I put up with him. Another example is when I was younger, I hated putting up with my sister wearing my clothes, but now I miss living with her. So I would happily put up with her behavior. Something I could never put up with in a relationship, for example, is a partner who lacks ambition. So this is a phrasal verb that we do not separate. You put up with something or you put up with someone. Phrasal verb number 3 is to look forward to. And this one has been very problematic for some students of mine because it has a bit of a strange structure. If you look forward to something or to doing something, it means you're excited, you're happy, you're eager about something that will happen in the future. But what's confusing for students is that here we have an example of a phrasal verb with the preposition to and then the gerund ing. We don't see this very often. Normally, when we see to, we assume that we need to use the infinitive, right? But with some phrasal verbs, we do use to and then ing. And with this phrasal verb, you have to use ing if you're going to use a verb. So, for example, I am looking forward to going on holiday next week. There's a verb with ing. Or I have never looked forward to exams. That's a noun. It's a thing, right? Another example of this phrasal verb with a gerund is I always look forward to drinking coffee. It's something I love doing. I guess you could say it's probably an addiction. We'll talk about this another time. Okay, the fourth phrasal verb I want to look up today is to take up. Take up is a phrasal verb that we can separate. So you can take something up or you can take up something. And to take up essentially means to start a new hobby, a new activity. Something I decided to take up or something I took up this year is paddle tennis. Very popular in Spain, and I thought, why not? So I took up paddle tennis with my friends. When I was 11 years old, I took up knitting because an English teacher of mine started a knitting club at school. I took it up when I was 11 and I still knit today. Another example is she decided to take up painting so she could relax after work. I'm going to challenge you to write a sentence in the comments below using take up. Is there an activity that you took up in the past, one that you have taken up recently, one that you would love to take up in the future? Practice your phrasal verb and write it below. Phrasal verb number 5 is to put off. And this is one which I think lots of people will enjoy because it involves delaying or postponing, not doing things that we should be doing, like learning phrasal verbs. You can put off something. So put off plus a noun, or you can use the gerund. So you can put off doing something, like put off studying, put off doing your homework. For example, the meeting at work was put off until next week because my boss broke his leg. Another example is I have been putting off editing my YouTube videos because it's really time consuming, but I need to get round to it. A third example is people, especially my English students, keep putting off doing their homework because it's difficult or because they're a little bit lazy. Sometimes they put off studying for their exams. In my case, I've been putting off learning how to drive, even though it's something I really need to start doing, but it's because it's difficult. So we all put off things or we put things off. Phrasal verb number 6 is to take after. This is quite a nice one because it talks about the connection or the similarities that we have more specifically with our parents, sometimes with our grandparents. And it means to resemble them or to have similar traits or similar characteristics to our immediate family. The structure is to take after somebody, and this is an inseparable phrasal verb, so we never separate taken after. It's always take after somebody. So for example, my friend takes after her grandma in terms of her musical talent. I take after my dad in terms of my hair color and my face shape, for example. But I definitely take after my mum when it comes to my skin color. She definitely has more of an olive tone. I think I look a bit yellow. My dad doesn't have that yellow tone that my mum does. So I take more after my mum in terms of my skin. Phrasal verb number 7 is to look after. You guys probably know this one already. It's a very common one. To look after somebody or to look after something we do not separate, is to take care of or to be responsible for someone's well-being or for something. Generally, we use this to talk about people, but you can also use it to talk about objects. For example, my friend looks after her younger brother when her mum is at work. My dad used to look after my sister and I on weekends, and my mum would look after my sister and I from Monday to Friday when I was a kid. If we think of an example now of an object, I asked my mum to look after my bicycle when I wasn't home. So not just to store it in the garage, but to check on my bike, to clean it every now and then, to grease the chain, for example, to give it a little bit of attention. So someone can look after something or look after another person. Phrasal verb number 8 is to get along with. This is quite a positive one. It talks about the relationship that we have with our family. If you get along with somebody, this is not a separable phrasal verb, it's always get along with a person. It means to have a good relationship with someone. For example, I get along with, or I get on with my Venezuelan friends really well, despite our cultural differences. In general, I get along really well with everyone, actually. It's not often I find people that I don't get along with. There's also no difference between get on with, get along with. You can use them both interchangeably. When I was younger, my sister and I didn't get along very well. You don't have to use with. I can just say we didn't get along. If I mention the person, I'm going to use with. But I said her name at the beginning, so I don't have to say it again at the end. My sister and I didn't get along very well when we were younger, but now we get along like a house on fire. Now, if we flip the coin and come up with an opposite phrasal verb, we have phrasal verb number 6, 7, 8, 9, which is to fall out with somebody. This is not a separable phrasal verb. We always keep it together. And to fall out with somebody means to have a disagreement or to have an argument with someone, and it normally leads to a bad or to a strained relationship. For example, it's very common for kids to fall out, right? They have arguments, they have disagreements. It's just the nature of human relationships. When I was 15, I fell out with my best friend, but then we made up and everything was okay. Phrasal verb number 10 is to turn up. This is not a separable phrasal verb, and it means to arrive at a place or an event unexpectedly. It also has a second meaning, which means to increase the volume, the brightness, etc. of something. But if we look at the slightly more difficult version, to arrive at a place, you might say, for example, she turned up at the party even though she wasn't invited. Once my student turned up to class 30 minutes late. I use turned up because I really didn't expect that person to come after 30 minutes. I've learned that my South American friends always turn up later than I expect, because I think us Brits are a little bit more punctual than people from other cultures, for example. When we come up with some examples to talk about increasing, I might say, my neighbor turned up the volume at 7 o'clock in the morning and it was really loud. Or sometimes when I'm in bed, I turn up the brightness on my screen just so I can see the videos a little bit better. Phrasal verb number 11 is to find out, which is a separable phrasal verb. And to find out means to learn or to discover information. For example, yesterday I found out that the concert was cancelled due to bad weather. Recently, I found out that one of my old students is ill, and it wasn't really nice news to hear. Phrasal verb number 12 is to call off. This is a phrasal verb that we can separate, so you can call off an event or you can call an event off, and it essentially means to cancel an event or an activity. For example, the picnic was called off because of the heavy rain, an example in the passive voice. Or he called off the wedding, which is the event, right? Because he realized he wasn't deeply in love. A third example is the afternoon meeting was called off, or our boss called off the afternoon meeting because he was sick and couldn't come into work. Phrasal verb number 13 is to end up. We can either end up in a place or we can end up doing something. This is a phrasal verb that is inseparable, so you end up plus gerund or plus somewhere. And to end up means to finally be in a particular place or a situation, usually unexpectedly. For example, after getting lost, we ended up in a charming little village. Or after I moved to Spain, I ended up teaching English, which is something that I honestly had never planned to do. Last Sunday, I ended up cooking enough food for the whole week because I got carried away in the kitchen. Time flew by, and it's something that I didn't expect to do, but it happened. Phrasal verb number 14 is to come up with. This is not separable. We keep it together. And to come up with means to suggest or think of an idea, a solution, or a plan, etc. For example, she came up with a brilliant idea for the school project. My mum came up with a wonderful plan on how I could grow my Instagram account. Some people find it hard to be creative and come up with unusual ideas. Some people find it easy to come up with really great plans. Phrasal verb number 15, we're nearly there. You might be falling asleep. Wake up because we're nearly at the end. Phrasal verb number 15 is to figure out. Now, we can separate this so you can figure out something or you can figure something out. And it means to understand or to solve something. Your first example is, it took me quite a long time to figure out how to put together the IKEA furniture. I think it's because I didn't read the instructions. I just tried to figure it out on my own. It took me a couple of years to figure out how to earn money or how to make a living online without working at a language school. Another challenge for this video for you to practice your phrasal verbs. I'd like you to have a go at writing in the comments below something that you figured out at some point in life or something that you're trying to figure out now. Phrasal verb number 16. After this one, there are just 4 to go, so stay with me. I know they're tricky, but I'm going to try and give you some fun examples so they don't seem so tedious or boring. Phrasal verb number 16 is to give up. It's actually quite a negative one. I think I should have put the more positive ones closer to the end. But if you give up something or you give up doing something, it means to quit or stop doing it, especially a habit or an activity. Often it's something that's not very good for you, like smoking. For example, my mom tried to give up smoking, but it didn't really work. When I was 20, I tried to give up sugar or give up eating sugar. That also didn't work because I just love the stuff. I'm not planning on giving up drinking coffee because it is honestly my absolute happiness in life. Those of you who are coffee addicts hopefully will understand the pain of loving coffee. Have you ever tried to give up something, or is there something you would like to give up that you just haven't managed to do yet? Phrasal verb number 17 is to look up to. If you look up to somebody, it means that you admire and you respect them. So for example, she or my friend has always looked up to her older sister as a role model. Often people will look up to a famous person or a celebrity as an idol or somebody that they respect, right? I really looked up to my Spanish teacher when I was at school because she was just brilliant. There are also other teachers on YouTube that I really look up to because they are just really inspiring to me. Phrasal verb number 18, we're nearly at the end, is to think over or to think through. These phrasal verbs are separable, so you can think something through or think something over, or you can think over something, and it means to really carefully consider or analyze something. To think carefully about something, basically. An example is, before making a decision, I try to think it through quite thoroughly. That's not true. I'm actually very impulsive and I rarely think through big decisions, which is actually the reason I'm here living in Spain, because I was having pizza one day and I bought my flight to Spain and here I am. I did not think through my decision. I didn't think about it carefully. I just came. So if you're impulsive, this is a good phrasal verb for you. Phrasal verb number 19 is to run out of something. This is not separable. We have to keep it together. And we always use a noun at the end. For example, to run out of time, run out of toilet paper, run out of energy, run out of coffee. Can you imagine? If you run out of something, it means that you used up the complete supply. You used up everything you had and there is no more. Maybe you ran out of paper at the office. Everybody used it, there is no more. If you run out of toilet paper, it means you used all the toilet paper. It's quite a scary situation. And now there is no more. If your phone runs out of battery, you used it all, there is no more until you find some more, until you charge your phone, until you buy more paper, until you sleep and recharge your energy. And the last phrasal verb today, phrasal verb number 20, is to run into somebody. This is not a separate phrasal verb. You run into somebody. Sometimes you run into something, means exactly the same as to bump into something. And if you run into someone or something, it means that you meet them unexpectedly. You probably didn't plan it. Like when you see your grandma or your neighbor or your teacher on the street, you can say, I ran into my boss. I ran into someone. I ran into my boss when I was at the supermarket. I ran into a student when I was at the gym. I ran into some problems when I was trying to design my website 2 years ago. So we can also use it as a way of saying that you encountered generally a difficult situation. My final example is, because Oxford is a really small town, almost every day I bump into or I run into somebody that I know. And there you have it, guys. We've gone through 20 of the most common phrasal verbs that appear in the Cambridge B2 first exam. These might pop up in the reading section, in the listening exercises, but you should also use them in your exam when you're speaking or when you're writing to show off your range of informal vocabulary. I also wanted to remind you that if you like this video, please don't forget to hit that like button. That way I know what kind of videos you like so I can make more of the good stuff and do less of the boring stuff. Anyway, I think that's enough phrasal verbs for today. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Stay curious, stay learning.